Today we're going to take a break from trying to get this remarkable 3-cylinder 719cc turbocharged intercooled diesel-powered Saturn to go faster, and we're going to talk about our new project car. So here we have a vintage 1969 Renault R10 subcompact car. That's not how you pronounce the name. What do you mean? Look again. It's spelled Ren-Alt. The T is silent. Oh. Anyway, this vintage car is 54 years old and has quite a story to it, and we'll get into that in a few moments. So as some of you folks already know, this car was manufactured in France, and that would make this car, French. So being French, that means the car is going to be weird. So let's check it out. The overall shape of the car seems odd, but that could be due to the European versus American styling, especially since this car is rather old. Now, the first thing I noticed was, this is the first 4-door, 2-passenger car I've ever owned. You see, with the front seats adjusted for a comfortable driving position, and I have to say, these seats are very comfortable. As I was saying, with the front seats adjusted, let's take a look at how much room's left for the folks in the rear seat. You're definitely not going to get an adult back there. Meh, I'm sure this arrangement made sense to the engineers at the time, but the good news is we won't be using the back seat on this car. So from back here, we can actually get a better view of the floor in the front of the car. And what's cool about this floor is it's completely flat. Kinda reminds me of the Chevrolet Corvair from the 1960s. It's pronounced Chevrolet. I got news for you, buddy. Chevys ain't French, and they're made in Detroit, Michigan. I give up. Whatever. Anyway, let's take a closer look at the dashboard. So from the driver's seat, we're treated to a somewhat Spartan dashboard. Now, given the age of the car, this dash actually seems to be in nice condition. So if we take a closer look at the odometer, it's only showing 83,000 original miles. It's been a long time since I owned a car with such low miles on it. Now, way back in the day, the metric system was invented in France by a guy named Pierre Metrique, or something like that. Anyway, I'll bet some French engineer was furious that the speedometer had to be redesigned for the American market. Well, they did a good job because 54 years later, here in the US, we still don't know what a kilometer is, and the speedometer is about the only normal thing on this car. Over here we have a little glove box for, well, I reckon your gloves. And because it's French, you get a second glove box for your other gloves, I guess. I'm not sure what they were thinking, but since this glove box has a lock, it's probably for your more valuable gloves. Of course, this is the climate control stuff. It has that sort of 1960s European look, but I'm sure it's easy to figure out. Okay, for the most part, everything we've seen is kinda normal. Let's look at something weird. So on this side of the steering column is the turn signal thingy. Now, I think at the time this car was built, the standard location for the turn signals was on the other side of the steering column. Why they did it like this, I don't know. Now on the other side, where the turn signal should be, we have this lever, and I have absolutely no idea what it does, but I'm sure somebody watching this video knows its purpose. The ignition switch is sort of in an awkward location, but you can get to it with your left hand, so I guess it's good enough. The windshield wiper switch is randomly located on the simulated wood grain panel, and right above it is what appears to be the switch for the washer thingy. Down here is the switch for the hazard warning lights, which I guess we'll be using a lot, and right below it on the floor is the high beam switch, which is kinda normal for older cars. Now on the top of the steering column, there's another random unmarked switch with an unknown purpose. I'm sure somebody in the audience will tell me what it does. Here's another look at the flat floor, which is really cool. Now, the floors on this car have sort of a rubber covering instead of carpet, and the covering appears to be in excellent condition. Let's take a look under the hood. Well, I guess this is the wrong hood, but let's take a look anyway. I have to say, for such a small car, it has plenty of luggage space. But where did they put the spare tire? Well, that's a good question, and it took me a while to figure this out. You see, in order to get to the spare tire, you need to push this unmarked lever that's hidden in the corner. And, well, of course the front of the car opens up to reveal the space where the tire should be, but in our case there's no spare tire. You get the idea though. This car can best be described as a restorable parts car. For the most part, the car is complete, but it has damage here and there. You know, things like dings, dents, and some minor rust. A car like this would have been sent to the scrapyard a long time ago, and that's a shame, because here in the US, these old Renaults are somewhat rare. So how did this car survive? Well, back in the mid-1980s, apparently this car had suffered a mechanical issue with the engine, and it was parked in a garage and forgotten about. Fast forward 37 years, and the car was rediscovered by a local YouTube creator and automotive treasure hunter who goes by the name of Mr. Goodpliers. And that's who I purchased the car from. I'll put a link to his channel in the description. Anyway, the fact that this car sat in a garage for 37 years is the only reason it's still complete and not a pile of rust. Now, we don't have any plans on restoring this car, nor do we have any plans on destroying it either. I think we'll have some fun doing various engine swaps, and at some point in the future, the car will find a new home and someone else can restore it or use it for parts. Now, this of course is the internet. I'm sure a lot of folks would like to get their hands on this weird little car, but keep in mind, we ain't selling it anytime soon. We have to have our fun first. Let's take a look in the trunk, or hood, and see what we can see. Well, surprise, surprise, there ain't no engine on this side of the car either, but I'm pretty sure this is where the engine's supposed to go. Actually, we have the original engine for the car, but it's foobar, and we'll take a look at it in a moment. Now, this is the exact reason we bought the car, and the exact reason we don't plan on selling it anytime soon. You see, the engine bay on this car is huge, and that'll give us a lot of room to do our shenanigans. You know, the other thing to keep in mind is, this car is relatively lightweight and weighs about 1,500 to 1,600 pounds, which is about the same as a vintage VW Beetle, but unlike the Beetle, this car has plenty of space under the hood. So this is the original engine that came with the car. I believe it displaces 1.1 liter and develops 48 horsepower and 57 foot-pounds of torque. This little engine could push the R10 up to a maximum of 85 miles per hour and could accelerate the car up to 60 miles per hour in a brief 20.3 seconds. Now, Renault claims that the fuel economy averaged 28.7 miles per US gallon. Of course, the engine has to be in the car for all that to happen, and if you haven't noticed, the engine's no longer in the car. Let's take a look at what's wrong with it. So the problem with this engine is its pistons and cylinder liners, among other things. Apparently, 37 years ago, a mechanic opened up this engine, and after a bit of poking around, the engine was declared dead. Now, 37 years ago, the internet as we know it didn't exist, and that's too bad. All of these parts are still available for reasonable money. Actually, after a bit of searching, pretty much all the parts for this car, like the brakes and whatnot, are still available. Of course, most of this stuff has to come from Europe, but they're available nonetheless. Anyway, let's take a look at one of the pistons. Yep, this guy is hammered. It looks like one of the piston rings snapped and did a number on the piston. The damage to this piston is obvious, but there may be more damage to the engine that we're not aware of. Anyway, the engine's probably rebuildable, but that was never in our plan. Which reminds me, let's talk about the plan. We need to get this car back on the road, but we're going to do it our way, and that of course means a stupid engine transplant. So what are the options? Well, we've had a lot of success with the Kubota diesel engines, and we could move forward and continue fooling around with the diesels. For example, we could try a Kubota Z482. Now, that's a two-cylinder diesel that makes between 12 and 14 horsepower. The Z482 is kinda on the small side, but it might be fun to turbo it and whatnot. And when we get bored of it, well, the D722 that's currently in the Saturn would bolt right up to the adapters that we would have to make for the Z482. The diesels are interesting, that's for sure, and because they have thrust bearings, it'll allow us to use the Renault clutch system. As far as gasoline engines go, well, there's the Predator 670 V-twin. Now, unfortunately, the V-twin doesn't have thrust bearings, so the clutch arrangement would have to be different, but we've dealt with stuff like that in the past. Now here's something to consider. The transaxle that's fitted with this car is also part of the suspension, and whatever engine we use, we have to use the current transaxle. Otherwise, we'd have to do a lot of cutting and welding on the Renault to get another transaxle to work, and that's not going to happen. So I'm going to leave it to the audience to decide what engine goes in the car, and if you have another idea, feel free to put it in the comments. You know, something like a lightweight 3-cylinder engine from a Geo Metro, that would be cool, but Metro engines are getting hard to find, so I'm pretty much open to all ideas. But keep in mind, my accountant says I need to be more thrifty because this channel spends more money than it earns, and that's a bummer because if you look in the dictionary under the word cheap, you'll see a picture of me. I hope you like this guided tour of our new project car, and if you're new to the channel, well, stupid engine swaps is what we do best, and you might want to check out our previous episodes. Now, I'm certainly excited to play with this new car, but before we get serious with this project, we still have to complete the diesel Honda Insight, and off camera that project's moving forward nicely. So stay tuned, and we'll start publishing videos on that soon enough. Subscribing to this channel is a great way to help us move forward. It costs you nothing, but it makes a big difference in the way the YouTube machine works. I guess they call it the logarithm or something like that. We certainly appreciate you as a loyal audience and will strive to bring more unusual projects to your video screen. Before we end today's episode, let's open a box that was sent to us by a viewer named Tim. But before we open Tim's box, I want to give a shout out to Brian. Now, Brian sent us this box, and unfortunately I can't open it on camera yet, but I've looked inside it and it's full of awesome. Thank you, Brian, and we'll put this stuff into use right away. Now on to Tim's box. Tim had contacted me directly and let me know that a package was on the way, and well, it has arrived. Now, Tim wouldn't say what was in the box, but I suspect it has something to do with the previous video where we installed an intercooler on our diesel-powered Saturn Coupe. And I think it has something to do with the way we mounted the intercooler. You know, from some of the comments that I've read, folks were saying that we put the intercooler in a place that's hotter than the surface of the sun. And yeah, I get that, but it works, and it kept the boost temp down. It looks like Tim sent us a bag of cold air, and well, we'll feed it to the Saturn next time we take the car out. Oh, there's something else. Now I'm confused. It's not a t-shirt, that's for sure. Oh, it's a Subaru STI flag. Hell yeah! This will look awesome hanging on the wall of our shop. So in case you folks don't get the reference, well, the way we mounted the intercooler on the Saturn was copied from the way the intercooler is mounted on a Subaru WRX STI. And I have to say, the STI version looks a lot better. But you know, we tried, and as it turns out, the intercooler didn't make a difference anyway. Thank you, Tim, and give me a moment and I shall hang this on the wall along with the other things folks have sent us. We still have plenty of space on the walls if you're so inclined to send something. The P.O. Box address is in the description. Thank you everyone for watching and have a great day. Until next time.